Life feels normal. You walk through a modern city, glass buildings, straight lines, everything clean, organized. But there's something a bit off about it. Like your brain is working a bit harder than it should be. But why? As you know, we didn't always live like this. For most of human history, people were outside or in really simple shelters. Nothing was designed to look nice, it just had to work. Everything around us was irregular, messy, constantly changing. Trees don't grow in straight lines, paths curve, rocks are uneven, light shifts constantly depending on time, weather, and what's above you. There's structure there, just not perfect structure. One of the ways that shows up is through something called fractals. Fractals are basically patterns that repeat at different scales. If you look at a tree, a big branch splits, then smaller branches split in a similar way, then even smaller ones do the same thing again. The same thing happens with coastlines, mountains, even clouds. Your brain is really good at recognizing that kind of pattern. So instead of having to figure everything out from scratch, your brain can kind of predict what it's looking at. And that's where this idea of processing fluency comes in. It's basically how easily your brain can make sense of what it's seeing. Natural environments tend to be high in that. Your brain doesn't have to work very hard because the patterns feel familiar. And when your brain is using less effort, your body usually follows. Lower stress, slower heart rate, less mental strain. So when people say they feel calmer in nature, it's not just a vague feeling. There's an actual reason for it. Now compare that to something like a typical office building. Flat glass walls, identical windows repeated over and over, same spacing, same size, same reflections. At first, it looks simple and fine. But your brain doesn't really benefit from that kind of simplicity, because one of the main things it uses to understand space is variation. In nature, variation helps you understand space. You can tell how far something is, what's in front of what, where things begin and end. But when everything is repeated perfectly, that information isn't as clear. So your brain has to rely on fewer cues. A good example is glass buildings. When you walk past one, reflections mix with what's inside. You can't fully tell what's solid and what's just light bouncing back. It looks clean, but it's actually harder to read. Same with large indoor spaces like airports or office lobbies. Big open areas, smooth surfaces, not much texture, not many distinct features. There's less for your brain to grab onto. So instead of instantly understanding the space, it takes a bit longer to piece it together. There's another layer to this. Modern design often removes what's called sensory richness. Older buildings or more traditional environments had depth. You'd see variation in materials, textures, imperfections. Even small details like how light hits uneven surfaces create subtle changes your brain can engage with. Modern architecture tends to flatten all of that. Smooth surfaces, minimal detail, uniform materials. So now you've got less variation and less depth at the same time. If you think about being in a forest or even just a park, there are layers everywhere. Things in front of you, behind you, partially hidden, overlapping. Your brain uses that automatically to build a sense of space. But in a lot of modern buildings, especially ones made of glass and steel, those layers aren't as clear. Everything starts to feel a bit flat. Your brain doesn't just stop when something is harder to understand. It tries to fix it. It keeps scanning, looking for something that makes the environment make sense. In nature, that scanning stops pretty quickly because there's always new information coming in. But in a modern building, that new information doesn't really come. It's the same window, the same wall, the same surface again and again. So your brain doesn't fully settle. It just keeps running in the background. Not enough for you to notice directly, but enough that you feel it. That's why some places feel slightly draining, even if nothing is actually wrong, or why you can walk through certain spaces and just feel a bit off. There are environments that feel completely different, and people usually notice it straight away, even if they can't explain why. Let's look at traditional Japanese architecture. Spaces aren't fixed in the same way. Rooms can open up or close off, light moves constantly through thin materials, and the outside is almost part of the inside. Nothing feels completely sealed or rigid. So instead of one static environment, the space is always slightly changing. Your brain doesn't get stuck trying to figure it out. It just follows it. There's always enough variation and movement to keep things easy to read. And then there's vernacular architecture. This isn't one style, it's just how people built things before everything became standardized. Using local materials, building by hand, adapting over time instead of designing everything all at once. So nothing ends up perfectly repeated. Walls curve slightly, surfaces have texture, layouts feel more like they've grown rather than been planned. And that naturally creates the kind of variation and depth your brain is used to. Not because someone was trying to optimize it, but because it was built around real conditions and real people. Thanks for watching. If you have any thoughts or feedback, please leave a comment and don't forget to subscribe.